Hello and welcome to Hexed Countered. My name is Joe. Today we're going to be continuing our Tanktoberfest series of games that all obviously have tank-based themes. And this one is Tiger Leader from Dan Verssen Games. This is the second edition. And the reason I chose this, because I have both this and Sherman Leader, also from DVG, is that there is a pretty decent amount of content on Sherman Leader, but not as much on Tiger Leader, which is actually the older game and was updated with both an update kit for the first edition to kind of bring it up to the standards of Sherman Leader, and then the second edition, which is at the standards of Sherman Leader without the upgrade kit. So I only have the second edition. I do not have the first edition and the upgrade kit. Some of the other videos I've seen on this game are people who had the first edition and the upgrade kit, and so the main difference is that some of the unit cards are actually in portrait format in the first edition, and in the upgrade kit in the second edition they are actually in landscape. So what I mean by that is, here's a Panzer III card, okay? Panzer III card, as you can see, it's in landscape. In the first edition of the game, it would have been something like, probably like this, I guess, with the tank being here and it being in portrait. So that's what I mean by that. So that's that's one of the differences between the games. So this is a solitaire game, solitaire design game. If you're familiar with the Leader series of games from DVG, they are all solitaire games. They all kind of follow the same theme, I would say. The mechanics are somewhat similar between them. To kind of get this underway, I have all the expansions. There are several expansions for this game, but I'm not going to use them here in this first video. I wanted this first video to give you guys kind of a vanilla look at what you get with the base game. And then depending on the reception, because this is a slightly older game, maybe there won't be a ton of interest in it. So, but if there is, I will definitely do something else that shows some of the expansions. So I don't have the terrain cards out, but what I do have out is I have my World War II Tank Leader expansion. This actually works with both Sherman Leader and Tank Leader, or Tiger Leader rather. This is the Tiger Leader Panzer expansion, which is actually expansion number 2. And this is just additional unit cards, basically. And then we have the Blitzkrieg, which is actually expansion number 1. I showed them kind of in reverse order. This gives you some extra campaigns and things like that. So you get some campaign cards, situation cards, special edition cards, event cards, etc. So as I said, I have these two. I also have the terrain expansion, which is really nice, and I will use them. I use them when I play on my own, obviously, but I would use them also for a video if I were to do one on the game itself. So I'm not going to do much more in terms of preamble here, and we're just going to get right into it, starting up gameplay. This is a fairly involved game as far as setting it up. Setup is actually fairly time-consuming, and the actual gameplay itself isn't really that bad in terms of time needed. Okay, so before we get started, I just kind of wanted to show something that will be off camera for most of my gameplay, but I just wanted to kind of show, this is kind of the, I actually forget what this is called, but it's kind of like a secondary display. Most of the gameplay takes place on the board, which is underneath this, which is the tactical board. So here we have this is on the tactical board. This is the special event deck, special condition deck rather, and our event cards are here. We have our enemy forces lined up here. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. This is what tactical movement, and we roll for that, and I'll also talk about that later. But here, covering what's basically the hex map of where the battlefield is this secondary display that I will move off and have off camera for the bulk of the gameplay. This holds things that explain some of the other pieces to this, like when you get hit by the enemy and take damage, this explains what the various things do, and that comes out of this cup here. So if we pull something out, like here you can see it says engine 1 stress on one side, on the other side it says exposed. One of these is high, this is armor piercing side, and this is the high explosive side. So this, all of your units will be either armor piercing or high explosive. Essentially it's basically hard target, soft target. So these are our units, the German units. And we have a rifle team. You can see here it says HE. That indicates that that's a soft target. I have several of these. And then machine gun team, also a soft target. But then we get into armored stuff, and we have a Stug 3, which is a hard target. An armored target is an AP target. Same thing for our Panzer 3, our Panzer 2, and our light armor. Basically, it's a it's a light armor. It's an armored car is what it is. So those are our units. And we also have commanders. And so the commanders have types, like infantry. So he would go with one of the rifle squads. He will go with one of the rifle squads, machine guns. Then we have our armor commanders. And they all have here in the corner a various number of basically their level. So it starts at recruit. So this is a recruit. That's the lowest level. Then you have green. We have an average after that. And then you end up, after your average, you get promoted to skilled. And then there's also veteran. And I forget what the top one is. But there's 6 levels overall. So you promote and you get experience points for promotion, and that's what this number is. So this guy here, he's green now with 3 experience points. He'll get promoted to average. And then from average, he'll go to skilled, and so on up to basically being like ace or something, I think is what it is. But anyway, the first thing we have to do is select what campaign we're playing. So since this is kind of an intro to the game, I chose the introductory campaign, which is the only campaign in the game that is introductory, is Poland 1939. So some things here that are on this card. So you see here it says 1 to 8, D6, 9, 10, D10. So that's for rolling the enemy actions, enemy tactical movement, and determining basically how aggressive they are, what actions they're going to take, right? So you roll a 10-sided die at the start, and then if we roll a 1 to 8, the enemy will use a D6. If we roll a 9 or 10, they use a D10. That actually equates to this here. So you can see we've got 0 through 11 plus, because there are possible modifiers. But if you get if it's D6, it's going to be 1 through 6, obviously, and then 1 through 10 for a D10, before any modifications. So you can see like the 1 through 6 stuff is, if it's a tank armored car or an anti-tank, you get hold, cautious advance, advance to cover, advance if cannot attack. But the higher ones, you get advance and so on. So that they're a little bit more aggressive when you go over 7 and up. So that's why for this introductory one, your biggest chance is to get the D6 so that the opponent is actually a little bit less aggressive. The +7 tells you how many SO points, which is kind of like the game's currency. Use it to buy units and upgrades and things like that. Then it tells you the theater, because that determines what terrain you're going to use. So European, obviously it's Poland. Participating commanders gain 1 extra +1 XP after each battle. So each week can have 1 or more battles in it, and this is a 3-week campaign. So but we're going to have, and the second part is to determine the objective, which actually tells you how many weeks the campaign is and how many enemy units there are. So we chose this. Now at the bottom, it also tells you how many leaders you can have. So we get 3 recruit, 3 green, 2 average, 1 skilled, and you have to go in order. So you start with 3 recruits, then 3 green, then 2 average, then 1 skilled. Anything beyond that, you get green because that has the asterisk next to it. So that's the default. So we don't get any veterans or legends. Those are the other two that I couldn't quite remember the names of. So you go from recruit to green to average to skilled to veteran to legend. It's not ace, it's legend. Okay, so that's our campaign. Now up here in the corner, which is probably hard for you guys to see, you have the objective card, which is this guy right here. So here on the objective, and you get to pick this, just like you pick your campaign. So this is going to tell you how much starting SO you have, which is 50. Now we get 7 more for the Poland campaign. It's 3 weeks long, and you get 8 SOs after each week. So we're starting with 57, and then we'll gain 8 more after week 1, 8 more after week 2. So 24 battalion points, that tells you how many enemy units you're going to have. And then you add 5 to all battalion operational move rolls during the first week. So that's again here, so we're going to add 5 to it. So that's where you end up with your 11s, and there are also possible negatives where you could end up with less than 0. You also gain 1 extra attack die when attacking at range 0. So if you get up close to the enemy and you're attacking at range 0, and sorry, my focus keeps changing on me here, you get 1 extra attack. Now normally you get 2, so we would effectively be getting 3. So, and then based on your victory points that you will accrue during the campaign, you get an evaluation that tells you how well you did. Okay, so as I showed on this card, we have 24 battalion points. So you draw enemy battalions, and here's our enemy battalions, and they have a number of points that have to add up to 24, and the points are shown here. So that's 1 point, right? And it tells you where it starts, friendly staging. And the battle lasts 1 fewer turn. Okay, so normally that you get 5 turns, and we can increase that with a scout by buying a scout, which I'll talk about in a bit. So we have then we have our scout force, which is 3 points, and your composition is in here as well. So they have 2 tanks, 4 rifle squads, 2 machine gun teams, 2 trucks, and 2 armored cars, right? So that's 3 points, and this number here denotes their identifier on their chit. So here's their chit right here, and you can see that says 4A and then 3 because the 3 right here. Okay, then we drew a small armor force, and again it's in the front. Enemy tanks gain +2 on attack rolls. So the way attack rolls work is higher is better. Tanks generally have it pretty easy for a 2 hit, but other things like mortars and maybe some of the infantry types, they need a higher roll to actually hit. Armored cars, things like that. So there are 4 tanks, 4 half tracks, 2 anti-tank, and 2 armored cars. Then we have a mixed combat force, also 3. We have artillery support, which is an enemy transit. So it kind of goes friendly staging, friendly transit, front, enemy transit, then enemy rear, and enemy staging, or breakthrough rather, enemy breakthrough. Fast assault, which is an enemy transit. They get +1 on tactical move rolls. Enemy rear. Outpost. So this is actually a building. So that's this. Nope, that's the truck. Hang on. It's this one. This is the building. So there are actually buildings in here that you can attack as well. And then the last thing is their armored headquarters. Or the last 2 things are armored headquarters. This goes in the enemy rear along with that building. So if you destroy this battalion, do not roll for battalion movement this week. So that's a big one too. It's also worth 4. And then we have supply convoy, which is all the way in the back, and the enemy breakthrough. And you gain 4 SO points if you destroy this battalion. So it behooves you to try to kill as many of the enemy as you would expect. I mean, it's a war game, so you expect the goal to be, if not capturing territory, at least to destroy the enemy, if not both. And in this game, it's mostly about destroying your enemy. The terrain stuff is somewhat abstracted. So after we do that, then we buy our units and select our commanders. So with 57 points to start with, right, I have a sheet here where I have to fill it out with who our commanders are and everything. But before we pick our commanders, we actually have to pick our units. So I chose a rifle team. Now, the key thing is your campaign has a date, and obviously Poland was 1939. So all our units have to have a date, and this is their date range when they're available. Obviously, rifle teams were throughout the war, 39 to 45. With the expansion pack, you can actually get experienced rifle teams that cost 5 instead of 3. And those guys give you slightly better stats because you can see their armor-piercing attack here is a 7. Their high explosive attack is a 6. And their range is 0. So same hex or 1 hex out. And I really wish it would stop doing that. So apologies for that. I'll try to hold this a little bit more steady. So I have 3 of those at 3 each. You can see the number up here. That's their ID number that corresponds with these chits here. So that's 911 and any tank team. So that when we go to the tactical display, they'll be on the tactical display. So we have a machine gun team as well. So basically we have 5 infantry type units. Then we have a Stug 3, which costs 7. But this has a really nice armor piercing attack. And then we have Panzer 3, which cost me 8. Its defense is a 2, which is pretty nice as well. So, and it gets a -1 on the attack when moving, so your attack gets modified down because you're moving, and it's harder to be accurate when you're on the move. And then we have a Panzer II. Obviously, this is a smaller, kind of early model Panzer, not overly effective, but also not all that expensive with a cost of just 5. And then we have our armored car, a 222. Which cost me 9, but it's got a speed of 2 and a defense of 1, so that's actually kind of a nice unit to have. I think you want there's also artillery and things as well. This being an early scenario, some of the unit choices are a bit limited because we're not mid-war when the unit mix was a little bit more robust. And the units themselves were a bit more powerful. Once you start getting, your Panzer IVs, your Panthers, your Tigers, obviously those are much more powerful units than what were available in the fall of 39. So once you have all of those chosen, then you get your commanders. And again, you have to use what's allowed on the campaign card as far as your mix of experience. So I have Eschbach here, who's green, and I'm assigning him to one of the rifle squads. And then here at the bottom, you can see we've got his stress rating and what that basically affects. He's got a medic skill, which I'll talk about later. Speed slow, I'll also talk about that later. And then any modifiers to die rolls for close range, 0, same hex basically, or one or more hexes. Well, how he impacts the attack roll. Oh, and there's a cool factor here as well. And I'll talk about that later as well, but he's a -1. Then we have Glesner. Glesner is also an infantry commander. He is going to also be in charge of one of our rifle squads. He's a recruit. We have Saltz, another infantry commander. He'll be getting the 3rd rifle squad. He'll be getting the anti-tank squad. And then Ackerman will get our machine gun squad. And then we have our armored commanders. Schmidt will be with the Stug. Meyer will get the Panzer III, and he has a mechanic rating, which is basically the armored version of the medic. Then we have Weber. He's going to get the Panzer II, and then Wagner is our armored car guy. So he's actually the best one we have. He's a mechanic and he has one tactic, and I'll get into how tactic works once we actually start getting into gameplay. So that's pretty much how you set everything up. Now you have to mark down here. We have basically a score sheet. So we write in our campaign, Poland 1939, what objective card we used for the Reich, 3 weeks. Outcome we'll fill out once we know. Then you have your targets. So week 1, 3A. That's the one that's in friendly staging. Now, these are in our terrain, or our turf, essentially. So they cost us SO points if they survive the week in our area, basically. So we want to push everybody back to the front and ultimately get into their territory, where we will have to pay SO points to actually push into their territory. So that's how the terrain is somewhat abstracted. The battlefield's a little bit abstracted in that way. We wrote in our commanders, their level. So I wrote G for green, R's are recruits, A is average. How many points to get them promoted, and then their cool factor. And then as they gain experience, it'll get noted in here. So you can do multiple attacks per week, but our first attack is going to be on that 3A. And I'm hoping to be able to do 3A and 4A in week 1 at the very least, because we have 9 battalions facing us. And we have a 3-week campaign, so we theoretically need to fight 3 battles a week if we were going to be able to take out all of the opposition. Now, you can change your unit mix between weeks, but each week, whatever you go in with is what you have. So if they get killed, then you lose them, and you'll have to replace them in between weeks with that additional SO bonus of 8 in this particular objective. So as you can see, we started with 57. I spent 42 on my units. And then I also bought a truck and a scout. So what trucks do is they allow you to pay less. They basically let you pay, they take away the cost here up to attack these other areas. So like the enemy transit costs 1 SO. If you use a truck for enemy rear, it would actually be free because it costs 2. And it would reduce the cost of the breakthrough to 3. So basically it kind of works out to be you're spending it either way, but the truck gives you the flexibility to choose which one you want to use it on. Depending on how your campaign is going, you might not be able to get to the enemy breakthrough. So you might want to use it on the transit or the rear. So it gives you some flexibility. Over here's our turn track. The next step would be to start the week by pulling the condition card and then assigning our units. But what I'm going to do is, since we're 20 plus minutes in, I'm actually going to cut this off, and this will just be an introductory video, and then we'll come back and I'll actually do some gameplay in a future video, probably in the next day or so, not to drag this out, because there is actually 1 or maybe even 2 more games I would like to have on my channel for Tanktoberfest. And I'm hoping I can make this an annual thing and do some armored featured game stuff every October. So hopefully you guys are enjoying it so far. If you missed the first 2 parts, or the first 2 games I featured, the first one was the brand new American Tank Ace from Compass Games, designed by Gregory M. Smith, who is kind of the master of the solitaire narrative game, in my opinion at least, and I think that's an opinion that's shared by a decent number of people. But that's an excellent game. Highly recommend checking out the game, or even checking out my videos, obviously, would be nice. And then I did a PC game called Armored Commander 2, and that's also an excellent game. It's got a very retro feel in terms of the graphics and everything, but The gameplay itself is incredibly deep and varied. It's based on the old Avalon Hill game Patton's Best, but the second edition, Armored Commander 2, kind of broadens it out to cover, basically the entire war and all the major combatants. So you can play as Polish armor, you can play as Italian armor, you can play as the Soviets, you can play as the Japanese, you can play as the Americans on any front in which they fought, from Torch to the Ardennes to the island hopping campaign in the Pacific. You can play as the British, Canadians, etc., etc. So there's a wide range there, and that game is excellent, and it's fairly inexpensive as well on Steam. And Armored Commander 1 is actually free, so you could check out the first Armored Commander, which is basically just Patton's Best in a digital format, essentially. So, but that would give you a feel for how the game plays. Now, the second one is obviously better. It's improved. It's got better features, and obviously, as I explained, a much wider range of campaign scenarios and unit mix. I'm going to keep the next game after this one a secret for now, but I am planning on doing that, and that should be probably next week sometime. So, for now, I will wrap this up, and we will come back shortly with actual gameplay. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it, as always. I know there are a ton of things for you guys to watch on YouTube, and I appreciate you taking some time to check out my stuff. So, until next time, my name's Joe. This has been Hexed Countered, and as always, happy gaming.